Hear me all right?
Sure can, Lee. It's great to have you here, man.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is awesome. Yeah, cool. All right, no problem joining with the platform there.
Nope, I opened it up in Safari first, and it like said, "Oh, you need to update Mac OS." So then I went to Firefox instead, and we're
Yeah,
good.
nice.
We're good.
Cool. Well, this is awesome. Thanks for joining us today. So why don't you just at the be just to get us going, like tell us a little bit about who you are and what is your role.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Lee. Obviously, I work with solutions at Vercel and also DevRel for Next.js, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about today. I live in Des Moines, Iowa, in the center of the United States. Yeah, I've had a history in web development, mostly focused on front end style things for my career, and now doing more things on the advocacy side as well too.
Right, interesting. So you work for Vercel, but you do a lot of work for Next.js, which is an open source project. How does that work in terms of managing the sort of the two different sides of your job? Or are the two different sides? Do they merge?
Yeah, surprisingly, there's a lot of parallels between the what I talk to with customers in the field on solutions, and also what I'm helping educate others, whether it's Twitter or GitHub or emails or wherever people reach out, helping educate them on how to use Next.js, how to build performant web applications, how to use the actual Vercel platform. There are a lot of similarities, but I enjoy being involved in both sides. And just helping out where I can. And I see Rob in the chat, who was born in Ames. I went to school at Iowa State, so small world.
Cool. Very cool. Awesome. Okay, so talking about, like Vercel has been, I think, really big in sort of the how to build sort of what I call modern websites. In terms of like what Next.js is capable of, it seems like it jumps ahead by leaps and bounds almost on a daily basis. Just in terms of what Next.js can do for the developers that are out there, or maybe if someone who's not even a developer out there, what are some of the benefits that you would say that it can provide as a platform? And then how does that link up with what Vercel does?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with from a high level for those who are non-developers. So for those who are non-developers, what Next.js and we'll talk about Next.js first, then we'll talk about Vercel. But what Next.js can provide you is more flexibility on top of what you might consider the no-code tools that exist. So you want things to be simplified for you, but you need a little bit more flexibility and some levers to pull for the rest of your team, while still essentially simplifying how fast it takes for you to build your product. And Next.js kind of fits in that sweet spot between going all in on a no-code tool and having to build everything from scratch with code, especially like we'll talk about today with starter kits and examples and integrations with CMS providers. For those who are more experienced with coding, really what Next.js gives you is a framework on top of React that provides pretty sane defaults for all the things that you would need to do, as well as tries to simplify the developer experience as much as possible, to help you make fast web applications that have basically all the things you need included. And then kind of how that ties to Vercel. Vercel, you can deploy really any application on Vercel, but we like to think of Vercel as the easiest way to deploy your React and Next.js applications, and basically not have to worry about how to take your site from the 10 people who are viewing it when you're just trying it out, all the way up to some of the largest companies in the world. So Vercel's infrastructure manages the scaling process for you so that you can focus on just building your product.
Really cool. And I think that brings me right back to the conference, because Vercel basically ran the Next.js Conf, or was it Next Conf? Can't remember the exact name for it. That was back in last fall. And I remember one of the moments at that conference. By the way, I've been to a lot of conferences over the years, a lot of conferences whose registration system tends to crash, or it's like everyone logs in to see the thing. And so it was interesting to hear folks say, hey, look, we have like X tens of thousands of people on the website right now. And it's like response time, I couldn't tell the difference between the day before or any other time, which was really cool. How is that possible?
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy origin story, because we decided we wanted to do this Next.js conference. We wanted to host an event for the community of developers and help educate them and teach them about some of the new things, and really just get an opportunity for people to meet. And we evaluated quite a few different options for how we wanted to host the event. And we're pretty critical on wanting to make sure that we can reduce as much risk as possible. We don't want something to go wrong on the big day. And ultimately, our conclusion came to, we should just use our products. We should use our own tools and build it. And then we'll have this for the future when we want to do things again. So, you know, the classic developer mindset, right? We can build it ourselves. But it turned out to be a great decision, because we really designed the solution that we built to be as, you know, fault tolerant as possible. We wanted to prevent something going wrong on the day of that would bring down the experience for those watching, or, you know, not allow people to register. We wanted to reduce that risk as much as possible.
Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my screen, and we're going to walk through this. There may be some spots where we have a moment to chat as we're waiting for things to build or something like that. So I'm going to try this, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully y'all can see my screen there. I'm sharing my entire computer to monitor, so hopefully that hopefully I don't regret that later. Okay, here we go. So there's a couple different ways you can sort of go and learn about this. So Vercel's website, vercel.com/virtual event starter kit, is here. Basically, that describes all the things that this conference did for you. Now, just to be clear, you actually worked on the back-end code for this. Like, were you the architect? Were you the main developer? What's your role in terms of this code base?
Yeah, so I helped build specifically the front end for it, actually.
Right.
But it's kind of weird, because with Next.js, you do a little of the front end and the back end.
Yes.
So it was definitely a team effort from everyone at Vercel, but I primarily worked on the front end for the starter kit that we're going to talk about, basically how you navigate around the site. But definitely couldn't have done it without some of the others at Vercel.
Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to click on the view demo. So what this is actually, it's been deployed, and we can actually go see what this conference site is going to give us. So I can see it's the ability for folks to register, and we'll take a look at, and maybe you can help me sort of figure out how that process works, because that's kind of a back-endy type of a thing with the front-end component.
So, yeah, maybe just one thing quickly here.
Sure.
When we originally launched this registration form, we hid the top nav bar. And the reason that we hid the top nav bar was to improve the conversion for people registering, so that there was, you know, less things to click around. And, you know, also we hadn't built the rest of the thing yet. So that makes more sense too. But basically what happens, you enter your email to register, and we're using Redis to persist that information for people's emails. And, you know, for the Next.js conference, we actually also used Tray.io basically to save those emails to a marketing list, and then also to actually send the emails. It's basically like Zapier, where you can just plug in and automate things.
Cool. And then, so I see we've got a bunch of stages. So there's some content in here, which is where the CMS side of things comes in, because, you know, we have there's 4 different stages. There's a schedule. There's a list of speakers. There's Expo. What's Expo?
Yeah, so Expo was basically our take on a job fair. We wanted to provide people the ability to sponsor the conference and advertise some of the things that they're doing, provide some links, videos, etc. So the Expo was our sponsor booth, basically.
Okay, so what I'm seeing here is like this website is kind of like the anchor for all of the content that's available at this conference. People go to it during the conference. Then there's the real-time aspect of it is Discord chat. So I remember at this conference, there's a lot of people in the Discord. This is great because you can drive folks to your Discord channel. So that's awesome. And then in terms of actual sessions that happen. So there's speakers here, and these are not real
Unsplash.
people. These are Unsplash people. My favorite people live on Unsplash. And so
it's funny because you see the same headshots like all over the web. These same people are famous now.
So this is July, and you know, she's got this basically this session here, so people could have, you know, these are the speakers in the sessions. This is actually really good. I've spoken at conferences where basically you don't even get a web page or anything, like you get the little blurb maybe. So this is nice. I really like this. So then if I click on a stage, sorry, I'm just kind of randomly clicking around here, then you can see the schedule for each stage along here. and pretty cool. So these ended up being, sorry, when these were live, these ended up being, what was the actual video platform?
Yeah, so a couple things you talked about. One of them was Discord. And the first thing I want to say is like, we tried to design this platform such that you didn't have to leave the site other than the chat. And the reason why we budged on the chat and why we pushed it to Discord was, one, we wanted to have that community in the first place, and this was a good opportunity to do that. But secondly, moderation was really important to us, and moderating the comments and what people are saying and ensuring that everything met our code of conduct. And Discord was great because we had some great community members help step up for moderation. So thanks to them. And also they have something called slow mode, which right before the keynote launched, we had it set on like 2-minute slow mode because there was just like so many messages coming in, you couldn't even keep up with it. So that really helped a lot in the moderation piece.
Right. So yeah. So Discord is already a great chat platform. I was just I've been at a couple different conferences on Hopin. I think you say it Hopin, where it's like it's a flood stream, and you can't. It's like someone mentions you, and I'm like, I wish I could find that because I think someone mentioned me, but oh, it's gone. So that's interesting. The slow mode. I didn't even realize that was on.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, Hopin's got like, they're like the fastest growing company I've ever seen. They have so much funding. It's crazy because virtual conferences are going off like crazy. It'll be interesting to see them build that kind of functionality into the platform itself because it's desperately needed. It's a critical piece of that experience. I've seen that go bad a couple times.
Okay. So this is cool. So there's a lot of content that's in here. And so what you guys did is this was built, I think it was built on Dado CMS, right? Initially for back in the fall. And then after the conference, whose idea was it to say, hey, you know what? Let's just like make this for a whole bunch, well, not all of them, but for a bunch of headless CMSs.
Yeah, we try to build these starter kits to make it really easy for folks to get up and running with Next.js and have more than a hello world, basically more than a basic example. They want to have something that they can actually see what a real project looks like in the real world and check out the code, deploy it themselves. And in doing that, we like to make them agnostic to whatever solution you want to use. Whatever CMS provider you want to use, we want to provide the solution and make it easy to integrate with people like Agility. And the same thing for some of our other starter kits. We have one for commerce too, where it started off as big commerce, and then now it's agnostic, and it has Shopify, and there's like 4 more on the way. So we really like to do that.
I'm excited about that. I forked that a little while ago and did some stuff there. So I'm excited to have more conversations about the commerce side of things. So this is cool. I can go in and check this out. So yeah, basically vercel.com, and then you just basically find the virtual starter kit, which I think is in the footer, but you can also pretty easily find it. Actually, why don't I just drop this in the chat before I forget if someone hasn't already done it. There you go. So that's how you get to it there. So there's basically, if you click this clone and deploy button, this is going to do what's called a Vercel deployment, right? This is like which is a really long URL that has a bunch of information in it. And the default one is Dado CMS, if I'm not mistaken, right? So we don't want to use Dado for this one because I don't work for them. Work for this other company called Agility, so we're going to use Agility. So if you want to use a different CMS, you can see that there's, I think, so all of these different CMSs are represented in there. And so what we can do is we can actually click onto the GitHub repo to see this. And so we could actually go through the code. And in the README, if you go down, it's got all the different CMSs listed and with their whatever setup instructions. And I think this is the thing that I love. One of the things I love most about Vercel is these deploy buttons that have so much information packed into them, where it actually has the starter data already set up for you. It does that, so like it's all preloaded and ready to go, and it's really fast. The other way you can get to here is if you want to read about the Agility side of this. We actually put a page up on our own website in our starters listing. I'll send a link to that as well. It literally has the same button there. So this try for free is literally that same deploy button as you would click on from here. So I'm going to click. Should I do it? I'm going to click it.
Let's do it.
It's going to be great. All right. Okay. So I'm actually already still logged into Vercel and GitHub. So I kind of jumped ahead a couple of steps. So at this point, I might have had to create a Vercel account, correct?
Yeah, so with Vercel, you can log into GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or SAML with whatever provider of choice you want if you're at an enterprise company. But
Okay.
yeah, so then you can go out here and it basically jumps after logging in, it jumps you right into this flow of, hey, let's clone this and hit the ground running, basically.
Right. So you can call it whatever you want. Since I've probably created 1,000 of these over the last several months as we were going back and
Story
forth.
of my life. Story of my life. I started adding like delete at the end, so I remember, hey, this is for a demo or something.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So, okay, I'm going to click continue on here.
Yep.
And then this is where the integration side of things come up. And this is that magic piece where it's going to list all the things that I need to connect to get this on here. So in order to continue, I have to click install on this, correct?
Yep. Yeah, this is really the magic piece where, from a Vercel side, we're hyper focused on the front end and serverless and making that the absolute best experience possible. We're never going to be an Agility CMS. So we have to partner with amazing companies like y'all to provide that full experience across building an entire application to production. And this works well because we want to give our customers the ability to pull the tools that they love and integrate closely into the platform.
Cool. I can't wait to see where this goes. It's already come so far over the last sort of 6 months. This integration flow, it is, as I say, pretty magical. So I'm going to click that install button because you need to basically set up an Agility account to get going. Now, I already have an Agility login, so it already knows who I am. But you can basically, from in here, I can just basically sign in with your GitHub account or with Google or Microsoft. So do whatever you want. I am a little lazy, so I'm just going to use my own account here, mostly to make it easier to delete later.
Yeah, for sure.
To clean up. So this is going to sign in with whatever thing. Oh, of course, that's going to happen in the demo.
It's always the live ones. Maybe Microsoft is having an issue.
Let's just click on the sign up with Microsoft button to see if that works. Oh, geez.
Oh, no.
I guarantee you this is going to probably not work until I close the stream. Try this one more time. It's one of those SAML things. You may have pressed. I did log out just before this. This is the other thing. So I'm going to try. You know what? Let's just do it as if we're a totally new person and not trying to be Joel Varty. Hang on. Okay, let's do.
Just make a new account.
Yeah, this is if you were coming in, and we're going to do something fun here. So let's do. Oh, I've got Gmail. I'm going to actually do my Google account. I promise you, this might work. Who knows? We'll see. Okay.
It's always something with live demos.
Oh my gosh, there's always something. Okay, so it's got some stuff going on. Looks like it worked.
Yay.
Hopefully that's all good. We're in. So it creates the account and connection, basically sets up all the data. So it's like there's a whole mountain of stuff that happened in the background there in terms of getting it all going, right? So that's pretty cool. So now I've got the data side of things in terms of the CMS. So I click on one of these repository things here. Does it matter which one I click on if I'm a Bitbucket person?
Are you, probably, it depends where your account's at. Are you probably a GitHub?
Yep.
Okay, then go with GitHub.
Okay.
And then it'll try to set up it'll create the repo on your GitHub account for you so you can, make it private if you want. You can keep it public. You get the ability to do that.
Okay. Cool. All right, so I'm going to click on that. I'm going to go through, and it defaults the project name based on what I set my repo to, which is cool. So this is going to create a Vercel project.
Yeah, this is basically just the review step. So it automatically figures out that you're on Next.js. All the settings are there if you need to modify them, but you don't. So you can just go directly into deploy, basically.
Okay. I'm going to do that.
The nice thing about this too is, so just to give a little context on what it would look like if you didn't have this. So if you didn't have this, you would get into this flow where you would deploy your project. And then I think we've all been there where you deploy your front end and then you follow a series of steps on a README where it says, okay, now let's create an account here, add an environment variable here, download this seed data set, and then add all these tables or add all these models in my CMS, and you have to do all these pieces. And really the goal with this entire flow is let's just try to get rid of all that stuff and make it as easy as possible to go from zero to production as quickly as you can.
0 to hero. All right. Well, yeah, what's really cool is this, I'm deploying code right now, but I haven't written any code, nor have I typed in any content. I basically just connected a few pieces together. I think the only thing do you ever get any pushback from non-developers about like the GitHub, Bitbucket, that sort of it?
Well, first on that, the thing that's interesting to me is, like you said, like you don't even have to have coding experience to get this far. And what we've seen from some folks who want to use this to run their conference, they're basically able to take this here to production and then go into the GitHub like GUI visual editor and just change a couple things to rename things and then call it good. So I've seen somebody with no coding experience still take this and actually be able to have a conference, which is really nice.
And here we go. Time to first confetti, which is what it gets referred to at the Agility offices. So we we just created our conference, and I'm going to click visit here. And this should look, basically it's set it up. I've got my project name, .vercel.app.
Yep.
And I created it. It's all there. It's done. It's been nice talking to you. Bye.
Yeah.
We're all good. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing when you step back and think about how many pieces were involved in that process to get us to live URL. Like when I think about how difficult it had been when I started coding to like go from 0 to live URL, it's amazing the tools that we have today to do these things.
Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty cool. I'm loving this, and there's a whole bunch of pieces going on like at the low level that I want to talk about too, but that might be geeking out a little too far. We'll get to that. So for me, from the CMS side of things, it's like, well, where is all this content coming from? And that's one of the things about this flow that's a little tricky is now I have to go actually sign into Agility. So you do have to sign into Agility to see your Agility content. I guess maybe that just makes sense. Now, the cool thing is it remembers that I logged in with my Gmail account, and that's how it knows I'm Joel G. Varty, even though my middle name does not start with G. This reminds me that I'm logged in with my Gmail account. So here I'm logged in to Agility, and now we can actually go in and manage the content for this virtual starter, which is our virtual conference starter thing. It's cool. The other thing is I didn't have to set up any API keys because I really don't like to have to do that. So this is cool.
Yeah, especially on a live thing too, you have to be careful because then you don't want to expose those.
That's right. So that's another good thing to know from Vercel. I actually had this conversation the other day talking about, well, it's a React app. I don't want to put my keys out on the internet. I'm like, well, the Next.js Vercel side of it, when you plug those environment variables into Vercel, those are hidden, right? You don't see those unless you explicitly say, put these out in the front end.
Yep, exactly.
Cool. So let's just take a look at the content here. So in Agility, I'm going to click on content, and then we've got all of that stuff in here, and this sort of some helpers helping me out here. So we've got.
Maybe while you're clicking around on that too, I'll just like explain why we needed a CMS because it's so critical. We needed this collaboration between people like myself on the developer side and then those who are helping plan the actual conference. And this is important. We actually had to change the schedule like on the day of. We had a typo on one of the times, and you already had people on the site who had it pulled up. And because of the system that we built, we were able to update that time, and the people didn't have to refresh their browser, which is really critical. So there was no impedance on those people actually seeing those changes. Right.
Cool. So we've got the list of companies here, which ends up populating the expo.
Yep.
Right. And you can see Vercel I guess Vercel is sponsoring every single conference at the time and level. Right. So that's pretty cool. That must cost a lot of money, but you know what? Hey, that's cool. So I've got the ability to set all the different pieces that show up on this basically this page here. So if you're, one of the things I like to do is like, well, where does that content kind of come from in terms of where and how does it get populated into the template? So I've got like these links down here. If I switch tabs, these links are coming from this links list.
Yep.
So I could have more links. We've got the YouTube slug that populates this thing here. So we could basically pin a video. So there's a whole bunch of features kind of built into this. Let's just keep on going and dig more into this stuff. So there's a job listing, which is pretty cool. I know that we were excited about that when the Next.js, the next conf was around, just to be able to say there's this huge community of people out there, and this is a perfect time to advertise jobs. So these are all there. Let's look at what's there. So we can say what company it is, and this is a picker, which is kind of nice. So the related content, And then all the different, basically really easy to set the fields and to rank these things. How many people did you guys have managing content, or did you guys share this during the conference itself?
Not that many. It was me and a few others were in here changing things. Probably like 4 or 5, I'd say.
Okay, cool. Now, one of the things that a CMS gives you so if you were using, like a lot of people do, like markdown files, or they have their code sitting in weird places that aren't a CMS, which is totally fine for most workflows. But in this case, where you have a few different people, you probably want to have something called preview. And I'm not sure if is preview built into this template or not. I don't think it is yet, is it?
I'm not sure. I don't believe so. Like the Next.js preview mode specifically. Yeah, not on this demo. I don't think we. For better or for worse, we rolled with instant updates on this one.
Okay. So one of the things that a CMS does give you with something like Next.js on Vercel is the ability to do preview mode in the same deployment. And so we'll talk about that. Maybe that'll be another session, but just know that that's out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's out there. It's waiting for you. Then let's click on schedule. Schedule there's a lot more stuff in here because this is basically every session, right?
Yep.
So we've got the sessions. We can link them up to speakers, and then we can set the start date. This is pretty straightforward stuff, right? It seems like it's dead simple in terms of the content side of things to get it all out there. So we can make changes, we can publish them, and all that stuff happens. And we'll talk about the little magic of how does stuff get updated in a second once we've gone through this content. So we've gone through the schedule. Let's click on the speakers so we can see all these folks that are in there. So we've got Blag and Dobromil. These names are the best.
I know. I found a name generator online, and then I had the photos from Unsplash, and then a name generator.
Yeah, they enjoy hiking, skiing, surfing. Pretty great. Pretty cool. All right. And so yeah, we have those, and then we have the stages. So you could set up however many stages you want on here. And so we've got like who's on stage A, and
this is a really critical piece actually of why we chose to use a CMS. So for context, we had a mixture of pre-recorded videos and live content at our conference. Probably similar to what most people are doing in the pandemic world of having these virtual events. So what we did is you can use a feature on YouTube. So we use YouTube as our video platform. You can do a feature on YouTube called YouTube Premieres, such that a pre-recorded video airs live, meaning that people can't like scrub backwards on a normal video. So they're watching it as it's live, right? So we were able to marry that with our live experiences. And the way that we made it seamless to actually transition between different pieces of content on the stages, between something that was live and something that was pre-recorded, is you're able to swap out what the YouTube video is that's shown on a stage. So you swap that out, and then basically the consumer of the event doesn't have to refresh their browser. They don't have to configure anything. The new video just pops up.
Okay. We'll dig into the technology behind that in a second.
For sure. Yeah.
So this is, then when you're talking about that stream, you basically just change this stream, click publish or update on the content, and then it just updates.
Yeah.
That's impossible. There's no way that actually works. So cool. Well, and there's no webhooks involved, right?
No, no webhooks. The reason why we chose that too is because we envision people coming to this and like full screening it on their TV, and then leaving and then not touching it. So you couldn't rely on them to refresh the page or to click on the next session. Like it needed to flow seamlessly, like it would if it was just on a wallpaper somewhere.
Sure. Okay, that's pretty cool. So we're relying on a bunch of different technologies. So we've got our CMS content out there. It gets somehow pulled into this code base, and then there's some refreshing happens on the background. Do we want to actually take a look at this code here?
Sure.
I think we should do this. Okay. So I'm just going to actually look at it right in GitHub, because I think that if I click open dashboard, so this is back on my Vercel sort of at the end of the deploy, we can click open dashboard. And what that does is it actually opens it right in my Vercel. This is my Vercel account, right? And in here, it links to, in case you didn't know where it put your GitHub or whatever you used for your source control, it would actually put your source code here. So we can actually, just as a really quick thing, let's just check out this dashboard just for a second. So this shows me a couple different things here. I have a specific deployment URL for this thing.
Yep.
So Vercel does have the ability, if I make my change to my code, it's going to create a new deployment and I can roll back and do that sort of stuff. I don't want to get too deep into that, but it is pretty cool that you basically have all that, which is like, if you've ever set up your own DevOps pipeline, that's really hard to do. It's a real pain. It's just like, it's done. Environment variables are all set. It's all configured. Yeah, it's game on. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of settings here. If you do want to go in and change things, you can. If you want to like kind of mess around, you can change your environment variables or different things. So there's lots of settings. There's even a delete if you have to remove things. So that's good because I'll be using that later.
Absolutely.
This is my, I've done multiple today just as a playing around, but you can sort of like, okay, I know this is what I wanted to do. You can roll back and delete. So that's cool. All right. Let's just actually look at this GitHub project here or this repo for a second. Okay. So
sure.
Talk me through it. What's
so I'll give you a really high level overview. So for people who have never seen a Next.js code base, it's totally okay. What you can think of is this pages folder is going to tell you everything you need to know about how your application works, because every file inside of pages maps to an actual route that you would type in the browser. So when you go to the index.tsx file, that is the home page of your website, right? That is all the code that runs when you visit that page. Same thing for the jobs file. It's that exact same set of things. And that's a really helpful convention, such that when you jump into any Next.js project, you immediately know how those things translate. Now, there's some other add-ons on top of there. You saw the underscore things. We can talk more about that if necessary, but that's the mental model that helps you understand where to look.
Okay, so if I look here and if I click on jobs, I can see that it went to /jobs, which is running jobs.tsx, which is written in TypeScript, right?
Yep, and you can use JavaScript or TypeScript, whichever one you prefer. TypeScript support it works out of the box. You literally just rename the file to .ts or .tsx, and it adds the config for you. Okay,
so really, really cool. And you can tell there's like, this is very well, I think it's very well encapsulated. So these pages are not complex in terms of the amount of code on each page object. So I've got a header and I've got this thing called the jobs grid, which in theory is going to show me on the jobs page, like this list of jobs, and it's done by that. So it seems to make sense to me when I look at it. So that's pretty cool.
That's the best part about the React component model is it matches what your mental model is of looking at a site and seeing the different pieces, like jobs grid. Okay, I'm giving it some jobs and it's turning it into a grid. That makes sense to me from a just code readability standpoint.
Right. Pretty cool. And then the sort of the thing that is the Next.js kind of glue here is what we call Git Static Props. So this is doing what?
Yeah, so basically you can think of Git Static Props as your hook to call whatever data source you want. Your database, your Airtable, your Google Sheet, your Agility CMS. From Next.js point of view, it's completely agnostic. And this is really the superpower, because whatever code you want to write here, you can hook this up to anything you want. And it runs on the server, so it uses Node.js. So you're able to securely make API calls using a secret to a CMS or something like that, fetch back all that information, and then you see that you return these props. Props is just this magic word in React that's saying, hey, go grab these jobs and then just forward them to my front end so that I can display them.
I have to tell you, this was my first project that wasn't me playing around on TypeScript.
Yeah, I'm a TypeScript novice too, so I'm still learning. There
are so many parts to it, but you don't have to use all those parts. You can just use where you're comfortable. And I think the most valuable thing, because we worked on this code base together back and forth, to varying degrees of success in certain cases, with GitHub being what it is. But the thing that I love is the strong type. So I know that this is going to return a list of these types of jobs, which means that if we're working together, as long as you know that I'm going to send you that, you can work on the front end piece while someone else goes and works on the back end piece. And that's kind of the magic. That feels a lot more kind of full stack to me in terms of like completing all those things. So this is really cool. Let's just jump into the get all jobs and see what's happening back there. Maybe this is going to let me jump around. Oh, this is kind of magical how it lets me jump around.
I'm glad that GitHub added that.
Yeah, it's cool. So I've just jumped, in case you didn't know, I've just jumped to the lib folder. So this project has a folder called lib that has like, what's that? What is it? Why is it called? What's lib mean?
It's, I don't know why this is a convention, but it's short for library. And when you think of library, you think of connecting to some service, essentially. So what we've designed inside of here is a agnostic way to hook up your data source. So using TypeScript, we basically say, here's what a job is, here's what a sponsor is, here's what a stage is. And then each provider gets to provide their own implementation of how they connect and match this API spec, essentially.
So this is kind of the thing that when people are building projects where you say, hey, build like, I call it a stub, something like that, or a mock.
Yep.
And what this is the mock of what everyone needs to, no matter what you're doing in terms of like which provider you pick, it has to implement these methods of returning a list of these kind of things.
Yep.
And then all you do, it looks like you're just checking to see, hey, do we have this specific environment variable? And if, depending on what environment variable you have, this basically the whole, object-oriented many shapes thing, the CMS API becomes whatever specific implementation. So in terms of agility, it looks for your agility good fetch and preview key, even though we're actually not using the preview key in this case, and then just assign it to be that, which is pretty cool. And now it just remember in the previous page in like I think it was jobs.tsx, it called get all jobs, which calls right to here, which calls right in, and then magically, if you're on Agility CMS, it actually calls into. Let's actually jump to it. Show the code real quick. No judgment though. And agility.ts, here we go. This is all the actual agility code to get the different things. And basically it's calling into the agility API, calling get content list. There's the speakers, schedule, all the different things that you need.
Something to notice there too, notice how when we connect to agility, we're using environment variables. And those were the things that were automatically populated by Vercel during that deployment so that you're not exposing these secret values to connect to your services.
Right.
Also, then when you want to run this locally, so you want a developer who wants to make some changes, basically they can pull this down from Vercel. They can run on the command line, they can run Vercel env link. I can drop a link to what it is, but it basically then pulls all those environment variables down for you so that your machine is automatically just set up. So then there's no like onboarding step of like, hey, run these things in the README.
Whoa, I've never done that.
Yeah.
How come you never told me that before? We never had this conversation. That's awesome. So yeah, I don't even need to pull. So if I've got a Vercel project set up, I don't need to type in environment variables literally ever again if I've done the deploy. That's nice.
Yep.
I am loving the heck out of that. That's a great idea. Cool. We do have a couple of questions that I'm gonna read off there. So Rob asks, when testing approaches were considered used as you were developing this quickly and racing the clock, what was considered or used? I'm not sure what he means there.
So yeah, I just put that link for the Vercel M2. I will answer that. I just want to also throw this in here while it was on the top of my mind.
Sure.
Let me see. Basically, I'm just going to throw this link in here too. It's just the Vercel CLI. So there's the link for that. So yeah, what testing approaches were used? We definitely had to race against the clock. I was scrambling the last 2 weeks before to get this finished and done. We worked with a few. I mean, we had our internal stakeholders, and then we also had a few external stakeholders that helped us test things and ensure things were working as expected. Due to the last second push, we didn't have any like automated tests that were running, but it would be nice to add something like that for sure, just for future reliability.
Right. Cool. Another question from Meg here. If you know which CMS you're going with, can you rip out the code for the other CMS services without it breaking?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's what we would recommend too. It's designed in this way such that you can switch it out easily, but when you know what you know, you can just delete all that code and save yourself some config.
Cool. I think it's really cool just because a lot of people compare different CMSs about and they don't really care necessarily about how it is from a developer standpoint, but most people making CMS choices are not developers. They're marketing teams that are like, does this have this front end feature that I want or benefit or whatever? And so from a developer's point of view, And what's the price plan for whatever.
Yeah,
But from the developer point of view, I just want to know how it works. And does
absolutely.
it work for what I'm doing? So this is cool. They all work with TypeScript and Next.js. This property here, we talked about this at one point. What does this mean? So again, what I would call Get Static Props, it returns this list of jobs, which I'm going to
Mhm.
return. So this jobs list is now available to use up in here, right?
Yeah.
What does this mean?
Yeah. This is one of the more advanced features that we have in Next.js. And really what it allows you to do is, if you think about how you typically build a web application, you have a bunch of assets and they all get put together and then deployed to some site somewhere. So when we first started this demo, right, it took like a minute, I think, to deploy the entire thing out from, hitting deploy and going. For a lot of teams and companies, as their sites scale and they get bigger and you add more code, right, that build time goes up and maybe you're at 5 minutes or 8 minutes. And the special sauce here with the revalidate is we're able to update this jobs page without having to rebuild the entire application. So what that property revalidate is saying every 60 seconds, if somebody visits the site, we're going to mark that content as out of date, essentially. And in the background, we're going to go fetch the new content. And then when that finishes successfully, we automatically update and, quote unquote, redeploy the site for you. So without having to wait 8 minutes or however long for the full rebuild, you get to allow that content to update on a per page level.
Right. So if we were to go to the other pages, lots of questions coming in that I want to show, that I want to get to.
For sure.
I'm going to jump to one other page. So like the stage page has this slug thing, which is a little different. And then it actually has, so that means that it's for multiple, and like any one of the slugs that come back, right?
Yep. Yeah, we
So
call
we
this
have
dynamic routing, which basically
Right.
means you have, any number of stages.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, with Agility CMS, in this you can either do like regular routing as all the Next.js projects do with the multiple pages, but you can actually run the entire thing through one dynamic route because Agility actually has a page structure in it as well, or you can mix and match. So that's really, really powerful. And then you get this thing called Get Static Paths.
Yep.
So what does that mean?
This is basically the idea as the other Git Static Props, where give me any data and I'll forward it to my my page. Get Static Paths is the same thing except for the actual URLs. So when you think about your website, you have stage/A, stage/B, stage/C. This is you telling your application, your website, here's all the stages, basically. So go fetch all of these stages and then tell my application when I'm generating it to make sure that you make one for each page.
Okay, so to walk through what's happening here, we're getting a list of all the stages. And then we're calling .map. So if you're not familiar, map is an array method to loop through all the things in the array. And what this is doing is saying, hey, all this is going to be /stages/ whatever the stage slug is, right?
Yep.
And then if I was to look at the content, this slug for stage A is the letter A.
Yep.
So that's how the content gets tied together with the code. I think that to me that's really, really cool, because it's like now a non-developer has control over the pages because they could go in and type the letter A1 and it would be A1. There's another parameter here that sorry, go ahead.
You were right on. That's what I was going to talk about. So the thing here with fallback being false, basically what that means is if I go to stage/taco, there's not a stage, the taco stage, even though I would enjoy that. So that will take you to a 404, just like it would with a normal application. The special thing here, this is an advanced feature, I can talk more about it later, but you can actually specify that if you want it to fall back, it can fetch that data for you on the fly.
Yes, Meg, taco stage. Sorry, I just got distracted. She said I wanted a taco
now
stage.
I'm hungry all of a sudden.
Yeah, don't we all? Okay, so this is cool, and just this is not anything to do with the virtual event starter, but the power here, if you're talking about Next.js with folks, is that if you had a site with 1 million pages in it, which seems outrageous, right? How would you ever build those at build time? Well, you could pick 100 of those to build up build time and have something that says, you know what, all those other pages we don't care, set fallback equals true, and then they will get built on demand.
Absolutely.
So cool. And it's like, there's the code how to do it. And there's lots more examples of there
For sure.
in the rest of the other code bases. So this is great. I do want to get to some of these questions that are coming in because
let's do that.
Yeah, because these people are awesome. So Let's see. I think we missed one. Meg said in the components directory, why did you not make subfolders for some of the files, those that pertain specifically to tickets?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a
this is
great
probably one of the
question.
hardest decisions to make, right?
Yeah, naming things is tough. I think that these absolutely could have been organized a little bit better because there's a lot of files in here. So yeah, they could definitely be put into subfolders.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that we go back and forth on a lot on our teams is like, how big is each file, and have you done more than one thing in each file? And then it's like, how many things are in a folder, and so should you divide them? And I'm guessing that as this thing was being built real fast, you know, you might go back and refactor it, right? And say, oh look, there's like 18 ticket files. We could put those into a ticket folder, right? So that's as the project evolves, it's okay to say, hey, you know what? I made this one decision that you don't have to live with that forever. You can change your mind. You can rethink that. Cool. I like this one. How are you guys able to remember all the code that you wrote? This is so vast.
That's a great question. It stays in your brain for a short period of time, and then you have to relearn it. So ideally, you write the code to a point where it's readable enough that future you can also remember how to use it. I try to always make sure that I satisfy future Lee. If I disappoint future Lee, then I've done wrong.
Yeah, comments help. And I
Yes.
find that even if you do sparse comments and no one's perfect at naming things, but I don't know if you've ever had, I know as a junior developer when I was starting out, you know, back in the 1960s or whenever it was, a long time ago, I would see senior developers, they would be able to scroll through lines of code that was like way too long for my understanding and be able to stop at a certain spot and recognize something. And I've been able to do that myself because I've made a comment or I do certain conventions like star, this is important or whatever. And so that will help too. So put things in your code to help you find it later. Lots of folks are loving your code here, Lisa. Nice job. You can tell the rest of your team that too. This is good.
Yeah,
good stuff.
Absolutely.
Has somebody forked this to a one-pager? Henri, that's a great question. So yeah, one of the things actually, this is the first thing that came to my mind when I first took on this from the agility side of things to say, oh, how can agility work with this? But then there are specific things that agility does that the other CMSs don't do. So we did not put those into this project specifically so that it could be everyone on an equal playing field. But a future fork of this could totally do that to say, because maybe you don't want it, you know, your pages to be under certain things and you want to give the folder structure, give your editors that ability. Sometimes that's something you want to do. So you could totally do that with a fork of this. So I could do that too. Let's see. Dealing with the same thing in an includes directory in a Jekyll project. Okay. Maybe you can help me out finding questions in here. There's lots of.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see.
There was another one that I saw that was important, I thought. Oh, this is from Meg. It's hard to know sometimes how much to abstract code without being too much. That's a really good question. And so when looking at this code base, what was your thought process for sort of abstract versus sort of direct?
Yeah, I would say that it was less abstracted when we were using it for Next.conf because we prioritized speed of getting things done. So then as we moved it to a more componentized, more modularized open source project, we knew that we'd be having new eyes come into the project who hadn't seen these things. And in that case, when you're dealing with more than a small team, you're dealing with a bunch of people who are going to be contributing or viewing the code, it is helpful to think about things in a more reusable standpoint. Basically, if you'd never seen the code before, you want it to be somewhat easy to understand, ideally.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I know from my perspective, I hadn't worked on many open source projects before because I've always worked, on app product or on my personal projects. And so if you haven't worked on an open source project before, open source people can be really kind. Like, and I like, thanks for Lee for being like super kind to me when I didn't really know sort of what to do. And sort of like, what do people normally do when they're doing open source stuff? So it's like, hands down, I was a noob at this and you helped me through it. So I had to, I thought I would just be able to create a branch in your repo, which doesn't make any sense because why would I do that? So I basically created a fork in my own repo. So I basically have a copy of the repo. This is how things normally work. I create my own branch, do my own stuff with my own fork, and then basically do what's called a pull request to go back in. So that's like basic open source stuff. And then it goes through a review. So Lee was able to review my code and provide feedback. And we may think that someone's being judgy, but really what they're doing, well, what are you doing in that case, Lee? Like, what's going through your head when someone does a pull request to an open source repo like this one, or for even Next.js, the main repo?
Yeah, it is a learned skill, basically developing empathy for those who are trying to contribute back to projects, because most of the time they don't have all the context that you do as the owner and the maintainer or the contributor. So you have to approach everyone I try to do this in general. Basically, assume that they have good intentions and that they're trying to help out and help guide them on that journey to get to where they want to be. So for a lot of folks, it's giving them the information they need to get that PR to the finish line. Here's something that you might not have considered. Throw in some good comments in there too, because you don't want to be all negative. That helps with morale as well too.
Yeah, for sure. That's really cool. Question about Git Static Props versus Fetch. And I didn't even know Fetch was a Next.js thing. I've actually looked at, and other folks out there, I've looked at a project called Next as well, which to me is sounds a lot like Next, but it's for Vue. But I would say that there's been a divergence of those platforms. Next is quite different from Next at this point. Git Static Props versus Fetch, are those things that we can even compare at this point?
Yeah, so Fetch is basically, it's a web API. So it allows you to, talk to some external endpoint, whether that's the Stripe API or, an Airtable sheet or something like that. So using Fetch with Next.js is totally supported. It's just pulling that web API off the shelf. Specifically, though, something to call out here for those developers who are listening, Next.js actually polyfills Fetch for you, which is a special word to say that you don't have to import it or include it anywhere. You can just use it and it works, whether you're on the client or on the server. As far as the differences, you typically would use Fetch inside of Git Static Props to actually call those APIs. Right. So in this example, I'm actually using Fetch to talk to Agility.
Right. And what's cool is, I know from my point of view, like being a React developer, I kind of think, well, I can do whatever I want and call asynchronous things in any component and do whatever I want. In Next, and in pretty much every sort of framework that's on top of React that generates pages, you have one chance to do asynchronous things. And that's Git Static Props, right?
Kind of. It's complex. There's a lot there. I'm trying to educate people more on all the different ways to do data fetching and rendering in React, because it's basically, just to step back a little bit, the ethos of the Next.js framework is that we want to provide a hybrid approach such that you can choose the best strategy for what your needs are. So maybe that's doing a good old-fashioned application like you did in the 90s, or maybe that's doing something like Facebook.com where they're all in on React, or maybe you're doing something in the middle. Like, we want to help support all of those different ways. That's
awesome. Getting to the last few minutes, I do want to touch on one more technological piece because it's impressive. There's this folder in here called API.
Yep.
So what does this mean?
Yeah, so API routes in Next.js essentially they empower front-end developers really to own more of the full stack. So you get to write small pieces of logic that can connect to services. They can do authentication. They can fetch data from your database. They can send emails. All these things happen within Node.js. So if you go look at register, for example, basically what we're doing inside of here is we're calling this route with a post. So we're calling some API. We're writing our own API here, and we're taking in an email. We are checking Redis to see if that exists. If it doesn't exist, then we're adding it to Redis. And the interesting thing here is typically, if we go back 4 or 5 years, there was a rise in tutorials around a stack that involved basically React and Mongo and Express and things like that. And you needed Express to get that API. But the nice thing about API routes is you can build a somewhat complex API directly in the framework without having to pull for an Express.
And for Vercel, so this is actually, we're running these APIs. We just deployed all these APIs, all this complex stuff. I didn't set up my Redis connection, but I could go back and do that later to kind of finish out this thing. So there's a couple more things to do, but that's all done. And then, so not only does Vercel give me the static hosting, so it's like it builds everything as part of the build, and there's a build output, like a public folder or whatever. But then there's a dynamic piece after that's running Node on the server at runtime when it needs to. So it's being smart about what code needs to run at runtime and what runs at build time, which is something I talked about actually in another session not long ago when I was talking about sort of full stack type things like registration and authentication, all this other stuff that's not really part of like static site generation. So this brings that all in the same project, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and just talk about that briefly again. If you deploy your Next.js app you can deploy it basically anywhere you want, and you're able to utilize these API routes. When you deploy it on Vercel specifically, what we do is automatically turn those into serverless functions, which is basically the technical implementation detail. And what it allows you to do is to not have to worry about whether I get 10 people or 1 million people viewing that and consuming that. It automatically scales up and down for you to handle that traffic.
Pretty cool stuff. And the fact that there's such a free, and I believe that personally, the reason these technologies, because like headless technologies are taking off, any API driven technology which I would say that Vercel is like part of that ecosystem. All of these things have really generous free offerings specifically targeted to evaluating these products, or maybe using them for personal projects too, depending on how big they are. But they're super generous with the free offerings because you can play with it, figure out how it goes, how it works, break it, put it back together again, build your things, deploy it all for free. Sometimes don't even write code. That is like really, really cool. And that's why our ecosystem is flourishing.
For sure. Absolutely.
Exciting stuff. Lee, this has been awesome. This has been really fun. I learned so much just from listening to you talk, man. You really have a great sort of presence, and I really appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
To speak. I'm really hoping that we can just take a recording of this and like get some sound bites, and I can try to remember some stuff. So that's good.
For sure.
I would do want to remind folks that Agility has another webinar coming up. So always check out agilitycms.com/events. Yes, Henri, this was recorded. I hope I pressed record. We will be emailing everyone that registered out with a link to the recording, so you can sort of go through it and find those little sound bites that Lee, all those little nuggets that he dropped. So that's pretty good stuff. This is great. Lots of stuff to come, and to be continued. Lee, I can't wait to speak again. This has been great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everybody, and stay safe all around the world. And until next time, take care now.